back in that day, we were all able to get together and get on the same game at the same time. That was really the last era for people around Brian and I's age of all of us, a group of friends being collectively excited for one core game experience, all getting on that game, all playing it together, or at least talking about it, having that water cooler talk. I mean, would you agree with that, Brian? I feel like that was really... I mean, we had a little bit of that early on, like with MCC and stuff, but it just didn't quite flow as well.
Everybody was on board for Halo 3. Everybody. Yeah. And I remember being in school, and just every kid in every class was talking about it. Kids were bringing their limited edition booklet with them to school to look through, read the manual. Yeah. It was just one of those things that everyone played Halo 3. You know that. And it was just like... It was kind of a unique time because, Halo's still popular now. Like, I know we say that it's not where it used to be, because it's not, but it is still very popular. But Halo 3, at the moment of that game's release, it was the most popular game. There was no competitor. It was the most played online console game. It was what everyone was playing. It was the competitive thing to play. And it wasn't until a little bit after that Modern Warfare came out, and that was the beginning of Halo not being the most popular thing anymore. Modern Warfare kind of took that over, and then Reach came out, and it didn't have as traditional of gameplay. It wasn't as seen as competitive because of things like armor lock, armor abilities, different things like that, and the bloom and all that different stuff. So it was kind of the Halo 3 was the peak. It was the height of everything for Halo, and I've said it before. And Halo 3 is Josh's favorite Halo. It's not my favorite. I love it, obviously. It's not my favorite one. But for me, Halo 3 is just the obvious, it's the best of Halo experience. It's the Halo that it had a great campaign, great story, great multiplayer, a bunch of additional modes that were great, amazing music, your Forge, your theater, online 4-player co-op for the campaign. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was just this... It just had so much
options. It was really the culmination of everything they wanted to do in the first two games that they finally got to do.
Yeah, and they nailed it right off the bat. There wasn't like waiting for a content patch. There wasn't like a huge mistake that was made, and it was just the peak of Halo. And it's not because developers now can't repeat. It's a moment in time, is what I'm trying to say. It doesn't matter if Halo Infinite was everything that it ever needed to be. If it was perfection, it could not eclipse Halo 3, because it's a moment in time. It's a moment in history.
It is. And I think that's part of what I get nostalgic about for that generation, and kind of the original Xbox One as well. Is I think, like, if I was to make what makes me nostalgic, if I was to take the feelings of nostalgia I get from that time and put it in sort of a time capsule, like, if you can close your eyes, guys, and just imagine, it was like, it's four things. It was Halo 2 Volume 1 soundtrack. It was Morgan Webb and Adam Sessler. It was just, I think, the sort of E3 industry at the time. The way, like, you think of someone like Cliffy B, who had sort of like the graphic t-shirt. He had the sort of semi-baggy jeans with the holes in them, and the sort of like typical gamer look, the Doritos and the Mountain Dew. And I remember just thinking of the Killer's Hot Fuss album. For me, all that together, sort of, if you stir it in a pot, that was sort of the nostalgic feeling I get when I think about that era of time. And I miss that. Like, obviously some things needed to change, like booth babes and stuff like that, but I just miss how the industry was. And even though it had a bad stigma attached to it, like gamers, and Mountain Dew, like I said, and Doritos and stuff, but I miss that stuff at the same time, because it felt like you couldn't get that stuff anywhere else.
To me, it was far simpler, and I know I'm going to sound like a jaded old man, but, like, to me, that's the generation that I if I could pick one generation to last forever, it's that one, because this is what it was to me. It was, E3, hyping up these new games, you getting excited, you go to GameStop, you have a badass midnight launch experience, you bring home that copy. For the most of the generation, it had a nice manual in it. By the end of it, the manuals were starting to go out, but had a nice manual in it. You put that disc in. There either was not a patch at all. Most of the times, there was not a patch at all. And if there was one, it was a couple MB, and it didn't really matter.
Yeah, and it would come later, and you actually looked forward to it, because you're like, wow, you don't feel like at that point you were missing in it. Like they didn't finish the game.
It was just, and you just got online with your friends.
Yeah.
It was just simple. You just buy a disc, you just play the game. There was no, and there was, like, I know DLC was starting to come out, and that was that's a whole thing we haven't really touched on much. Like Horse Armor and Oblivion was the first DLC. We eventually got, Halo routinely had DLC packs that were, I think, $15 usually for a new map pack.
Retrospect.
And
now, that sounds like a lot.
So there definitely was issues and complaints with like DLC being either overpriced, not fair, or should
and you have Microsoft points even before they transitioned to regular dollars, which PlayStation was already doing.
But ultimately, like, the business practices did not seem nearly as invasive as they are now. There wasn't much in the way of microtransactions. DLC, there was definitely cases of it being unfair, but you could argue most of the time that, that the DLC was usually worth it. $15 for a Halo map pack, an extra $20 for some side campaign content. Like, all the Oblivion and the DLC, all the Oblivion DLCs like Knights of the Nine, Shivering Isles, Skyrim's Dawn Guard, Dragonborn, that stuff was worth the money, and it was really awesome. So it was just
what's that? I said you got a lot of bang for your buck with that.
Yeah,
it was a cool time. I mean, you guys think about like the Halo 3 launch that had Bill Gates there, and it's like, this is the biggest nerd of all nerds, and you have him at the Halo 3 launch selling the first copy, and like, you want him there for that kind of thing, and he was there, and it was just. I don't know, between being just an OG Xbox fan and then going into the 360 era, I think that was so exciting because of stuff like that. They made it cool. Like when the first Xbox was revealed, you had Dwayne Johnson there, The Rock on E3 with Bill Gates talking about it. Like they made it fun. They made it cool. And we look back on that stuff and we get nostalgic for it, because now it's like, I mean, some of it is, yes, because we've gotten older, but the industry has changed so much that it's probably an entirely different experience for the kids that are playing Fortnite, that are playing these other games. Like, they don't quite have those like cool people, hip people. I mean, now it's different because you have streamers, and that's probably what they kind of go for. You have people like Ninja and stuff, but it's entirely different than what we had the previous 2 gens of Xbox. I mean, you would agree with that, right?
It's the perfect middle ground in history, because if you go back a further generation, if you go back to the Xbox, GameCube, PS2 generation, very early / weak internet infrastructure. When I say weak, I'm referring to PS2 and GameCube. They had their own internet versions, but it was not really plausible. Xbox Live obviously was stellar for its time on the original Xbox, but Microsoft, when they put out the original Xbox, it didn't sell gangbusters. It didn't even sell 30 million consoles. The PS2 sold like over 150 million. The Microsoft changed up the industry so much by making the console ship with a hard drive. You don't need memory cards. Making Xbox Live a thing.
Did you know when you played Halo 2 for the first time that you were immediately like an Xbox fanboy? Like, I mean,
pretty much.
Because I think for me, honestly, as soon as I played Combat Evolved, I think that was the moment where I was like, okay, even though this is only one game that I've experienced, like, suddenly I'm here and I prefer this over PlayStation.
I can put my Linkin Park soundtracks on the dashboard.
Yeah,
on the
Xbox, it's not the crap on PlayStation. Love PlayStation, but it's just I think that was like. It was a weird moment because PlayStation had so many great games in PlayStation 2, one of the greatest console gens. PlayStation 4 is great. I love it. PlayStation 1, I don't like PlayStation 3 as much, but that's really the black sheep. But my point is that I didn't ever have that with the PlayStation, despite all the great things they offer that some could even argue is better. When it came to Halo on Xbox, I was like, bam, I'm here to stay. You had me with this one game. It completely sold me on that green and black experience of aesthetic and style and approach that they had. It was just so much. It was so fun, and I just going into that 360 era, I guess.
You had online gaming was a thing. Hard drives came on consoles. Netflix, Hulu, all those apps started coming out on those systems.
Yeah,
and games were in HD. They were very quality AAA experiences, and DLC and microtransactions weren't over the top. Content updates weren't bad. The patches weren't horrific. So that was that perfect middle ground where you look at, like, if you go back to the Xbox, PS2, GameCube generation, it's like, okay, we're not really there yet with technology.
You can see the writing on the wall, but it's not quite there.
But then when you get to the Xbox One, PS4 generation, it's like, okay, now we're too far with online requirement, patches, DLC, microtransactions. So like that was the perfect middle ground where it's like we get all the benefits of the future, but we also get the simplicity of the past.